We've been getting a lot of questions on the channel about cold brew and how to make good cold brew. And one of the great things about cold brew is that it is pretty easy to make. It is a fairly simple process. In fact, back in my early days of coffee, before I had any equipment, I used to make cold brew just by filling up a glass with coffee grinds and water in the fridge and then straining it through a steel sieve afterwards and just having a cup of cold brew. Probably wasn't the best cup of cold brew I ever made, but it worked and it was still really good and drinkable. There's a lot of different methods to making cold brew. They all kind of work. They all have their advantages and disadvantages. I want to, on today's episode, show you how you can use your pour over equipment to do at least the straining process and how I do this sometimes at home. So whether you have a Chemex or a Gami or whatever, it's the same method. We're gonna use a V60 on this episode. But it all starts with the actual prep. You can just use any sort of jug you might have at home or even just a large glass. We're gonna use our milk pitcher. Our ratio is 8 grams of water to every 1 gram of coffee. So we're gonna fill this pitcher up with 320 grams of water, 320 milliliters of water, right there. And then I've ground 40 grams of coffee. I grind it pretty coarse. It's coarser than a French press, for example, so it's quite coarse. And then we're just gonna pour this into the top of the coffee, or on top of the water. And the reason we're putting it on top is if you put it on the bottom, some of it kind of gets settled on the bottom and sticks, and you don't get as good of an extraction. Then we're just going to use a spoon and give it a light stir. Not a crazy stir, just a light stir to make sure all the coffee is saturated. We're using our Honduras. It's a natural, it's really fruity and makes a really nice cold brew. So that's saturated. We're going to now leave this for 12 hours and we'll check in with you in 12 hours. Okay, so I have a bit of a confession to make. It's not been 12 hours, it's been 24. But one of the cool things about cold brew, pun totally intended, is that the extraction time doesn't need to be super precise. Yes, we find like 12 to 16 hours is kind of the sweet spot, but even up to 24 hours, you get some really good results. You might just get a really strong cup of coffee. At home, I have one of these guys. I don't even measure it. This is, I know, a 450 milliliter cup. I fill it almost to the top, add my 40 grams of water, and then I do the same process. So this is easy. This is an easy process. And I'm not going to use one of these glasses. I just wanted to show you that it doesn't need to be a milk pitcher. We do have our milk pitcher. It's been sitting for said 24 hours. I'm going to stir it. And the reason I'm stirring it is just to lift the ground that has been stuck to the bottom and like put it back into the water. Suspend it in the water again, if you will, just so that nothing gets clogged in there. And we're gonna put the filter on the top. I've pre-wet the filter just to remove any sort of like dust or just bad things that have been on that filter. I'm gonna clear the scale. I have it on a scale because I wanna show you guys the weight that comes out of this. Remember, we did 320 grams of water to 40 grams of coffee. And we're literally just gonna pour this in. And the extraction time's not important because you're not doing a pour over. You're essentially just using this filter to strain out all the like tiny little particles of coffee. So you can kind of leave it like this until it all comes out. You do not need to scoop out all the coffee because the coffee that comes out is gonna look like that. It's basically dry. So you then have essentially an empty pot. Well, it's not empty. You then have like, I don't know, 35 grams worth of coffee ground still in there. You then have to clean this part out, but then you just wait. So one of the things I love about this process is it's easy. So you can literally just, set this up, dump your coffee in through the filter and then go do other things. This drawdown for it to dry out can take 2 to 5 to 6, 7 minutes, but you can just leave it and go and do other things. Hurry up, do cold brew, do cold brew. It's gone from like a full-on stream to just a trickle. This will happen, that's totally normal. That's why you kind of want to just leave it for a while. But the top camera up there will show this, but you can see all of the like gunk and oils that get trapped in on the top of the filter. This is what doesn't get filtered out if you use the French press method. And some people might like that. They might like all the oils. They might like the grimy sediment of the coffee grounds. But this filtered version filters this out. Okay, so it's still like dripping through, but it's essentially done. I'm gonna take this off, set that to the side. And in the end, we have about 260 milliliters of cold brew. And I should say that this is pretty strong stuff. So the reason I do this into a pot is because essentially this is a really strong cup of coffee. 40 grams worth of coffee is enough for 2 people on ice. If you want to do this recipe just for yourself, just split it in half. And you do probably want to put it on ice or a little bit of milk or something like that. Otherwise, it just might be too strong. It's not a concentrate, but it is very strong. So, let's test it out. And it's actually delicious. It's really good. I probably should have put some ice in there to really cool it down, but that's a really, really nice coffee. And I think this is probably one of the easier ways to make cold brew at home. But we'd also like to hear how you make cold brew at home. So let us know in the comments, and we'll see you on the next video.